All right, happy October, Travis. A little horror theme to our live here today.
I saw the film cut up and the blood splatter. I'm like, oh, he's getting a little bit of festive here. Not very into tumnel field, but a little blood and guts. So I like what it's looking like here. Very cool.
Yeah, just and working title Conversing Cousins. What do you want to maybe talk about today?
Yeah, I was like, man, that's a strange show name, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna shoot on it and let it go. So we're gonna go with it.
It was one of those. What's the very first thing you think of? Okay, let's put it out because we're gonna talk.
Yeah.
It's like throw this thing together and let's go.
Let's go. Yeah, I'm with you.
So AEW, Travis, I sent you a message when I did to set this thing up, and it was like, I thought to myself, between the two of us, do you think we hit half the Dynamites live?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. So, while I was in the shower, because it was a long night last night driving back from Toronto, I was thinking to myself, how many did we do over the course of the year? And I was trying to figure out myself how many that I've been to between, all the different travelings and stuff like that. Half is probably a stretch, but quite a few. Maybe a fourth.
Yeah,
which is still
that's a lot. Through the end of 2020. Well, you have to pull out the strict pandemic time, but that Jacksonville run, I did so many.
Yeah.
So there was a time period where I think we were pretty close.
I think I'm at probably live Dynamites now, somewhere in the vicinity of. It's approaching around 20 at this point. Yeah. So 17, 18, somewhere's in there. Quite a few.
Quite a few. But you left Rochester yesterday, ran up to Toronto to see Dynamite, the first Canadian. Any trouble at the border?
Other than picking the wrong lane and being there at kind of rush hour, it wasn't a problem. We were in through, and it was a quick process at the border when the car finally got up there. But I was a little disappointed with the Canadian side. They only had 3 lanes open. They clearly should have had 4 or 5 so that I could have gotten through. And I had to charge while I was on my way up there too. So that took a little bit of time, but I got to visit one of the local malls and eat a salad in Canada and have some bubble tea. So overall, pretty good experience on the way up to the venue.
Oh, nice. Well, so AEW Dynamite from Canada last night, really big show. They have had a lot of big shows recently. Last night, really stacked card, and they have another show tonight. I don't think you're getting in the car and going up to Rampage tonight, right?
I'm not headed to Rampage. We're not going to make the trip up there tonight. Although I could have. The card, I don't know if the whole card was announced, and the card wasn't announced obviously before we got to the venue. It's tickets I'm sure are still available. Pretty cool venue. But yep, not making the trip up there for that one.
They announced 4 matches last night, so that's probably the full Rampage card. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a ton of dark elevation and stuff like that they shoot, but
yeah, and I didn't know what the format was going to be, right? You go up for it's about a 2.5-3 hour drive depending on traffic when you go up there, and for an hour of live wrestling without knowing what the rest of the production is going to be like. I've been to a lot of these things, that feels like I'll watch it at home while I'm watching baseball.
Yeah, I will be really interested to see what it looks like, because last night they said on air it was sold out. And I would imagine that tonight is not going to be in that situation. Did it feel sold out when you were there?
So the venue's a little bit different. It's the Toronto Marlies home arena, so it's a minor league. It's as big of a minor league team as you can be. They're the Toronto Maple Leafs feeder team, and obviously hockey's massive in Canada and Ontario and that whole area. So it had kind of the same feel as when we've been to the Boston venues or the Philly venues on the Temple campus. It did feel sold out. It was very interesting though for a Dynamite. Very, very long runway. The back of it was sold. It was sold almost like a pay-per-view. They were way, way off to the side. There were limited boxes up at the top that had people in them that were not sold, but it was just a really wide bowl. and they didn't put the ring. Sometimes they put the ring on one end of the arena and they just kind of block off a third of it. That wasn't the case. They put the entrance on the very end of the hockey rink, and they made the wrestlers come all the way down to actually get into the ring. And those seats, all of those seats in there were definitely sold out.
It's funny you mentioned that thing about the long ramp. I felt the same way when we went to see Dynamite in Fort Myers, where it felt like we actually were on the end, like opposite the ramp, and it felt like the ring was forever away.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And last night, if you were watching the show, I feel like Chris Jericho held that belt up for about 20 minutes before Danny Garcia made it to the ring. So.
Yeah, he was definitely on the hop to get there and on the fly. I mean, I think if anything, the crowd noise, the hockey style arena with the more open, wide area, the crowd noise wasn't as loud as it's been in some other areas, but it was a good Canada crowd. I've been to the shows, the WWE shows there, which can obviously feel a little bit like Bizarro World, and it felt like the way that Tony kind of sewed the show together by using Canadians at every kind of step. They actually had a fairly active, normal crowd. I didn't think anything was, there wasn't contrarian chants or anything like that. It was pretty good.
Well, it strikes me the first person that comes out on Dynamite is a Toronto native and a brand new signing for AEW, Renee Paquette. And not only it's great for her. She's in her hometown of Toronto this week, and then she's in her residing from next week. So she's what a great start.
Yeah, it was awesome. And the Twitter picture had went up with the picture of the people backstage, and just with a Tony Did It sign, and in the background of that spot of the WWE backstage show, you've got Samoa Joe, Renee Paquette, Adam Cole, CM Punk, and I forget who the fifth is in that picture, but he has them all now to some degree. Good for her. Good get. I mean, Renee is super, super, super talented. Just a great personality. She's got her own show and stuff. I'm interested to see sort of what role she takes on. It's another one of those things where they've got a whole bunch of talent and only so much TV, so now you've got Alex Marvez, Tony Schiavone, and her, as well as the other gal that does some of the backstage segments with Hook that's a little more Rampage focused. So I'm like, you've got a lot going on there as far as what you do. But it's one of those things where if Renee Paquette wants to do something for you, I mean, she's a pro. You take her and run with it.
Top talent in that as far as that goes. And Maggie, my wife, and I were talking. She could do anything. They could do another. The Warner Brother executives had just said in the last 2 or 3 days that they were looking to come up with. First of all, they're happy with the success of Dynamite. They're happy with the ratings. They're drawing big numbers. They're 4th on cable every Wednesday. They're doing well, and because of that, they're looking at sort of ancillary program, I forget what the term they use in the TV world, but basically non-wrestling type programs that they could put in there, and Renee's kind of perfect for that.
Without a doubt.
Do a talk show, a news show, anything like that. She's married to the world champion, so we can't do Roads to the Top anymore. Maybe we can do I don't know what you mocks to the bottom or something.
I'm not sure either, but she is one of those people that's just super talented, super creative. I mean, she's got a great little cookbook that she put out. Her show is phenomenal. I like the fact that when she started it, she commingles. She is friends with everybody from every brand and stuff. So you do get different takes all the time there. And I don't know. I enjoy her interview style in that it feels like she asks interesting questions that I want the answer to too. And it's not just kind of this canned script. And people feel comfortable talking to her. They tend to open up a little bit. And I mean, she's just fabulously professional. So I think it brings the show up a notch to have her involved in whatever the product is.
And on the the wrestling side of things, she was, she's the most sought after person in that Okerlund position since him, I think. And I can't put my finger on why it is that she is what she is, but she's phenomenal in that position. And it almost, I was thinking are they going to put her on commentary because they already have a million commentators, but they don't have a female voice, and I wonder if maybe that is something that they would do because they could use it at times.
Yeah, without a doubt. I agree with that too. It would be nice if maybe they inserted her as part of the women's matches or any match. To that said, I mean they've tried some stuff, women on commentary. They've had Veda
Yep.
Scott. They've had some spots where they brought either Britt or Tony or Soraya out, and done some different things there, but it doesn't feel like they've ever had much of a home there. A lot of times I look at these signings and I'm like, okay, well they're really got to figure out what they're going to do with this ROH brand, and they're going to build that. She doesn't
Yeah.
feel like that type of fit to me.
No.
That feels a little bit more rough around the edges and what's the way the presentation should be. Professional, but a little bit more dirty. And she's super, super clean and tied up and wrapped up. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what it goes. Tony had come out before the show saying you guys were going to see a Toronto native. I was pretty confident that's what we were going to get, but didn't know for sure. So, yeah, it was good, and it's good to have her as part of the team for sure.
And they brought her out, and they actually put her straight to work because she brought out Christian Cage. And going into this, I was a bit concerned because Christian Cage, there's no question, the man is going to be over in Toronto. He's going to be super, super over. And Jungle Boy, he's not on the run of his career right now. He's, losing a lot of matches. So I was concerned that, for Jungle Boy's sake, this might not be the best thing to have him in this position. But to Christian Cage's credit, he knew this. He read the room, right, and he took the cheap tricks, got the booze, and didn't go to ringside right away. I think that helped as well.
Yeah, so they crafted that end of it masterfully, because you're exactly right. So the initial thing was that the fans were on it. They definitely cheered him, and then luckily for him, he had two places where he could go. And he actually went to the other side of it on commentary when I was watching it back this morning. And he mentioned the fact that the Blue Jays blew a lead the other day in the last inning in the playoff game. So he had a couple of different sports references that he could go to. His wit, he has a sharpness to it that's a little bit less goofy, but it's similar in quickness and similar in delivery than what Heenan had. If he ever went that side in commentary and decided that he wanted to light things up, I think he could do really well in that role, because he just has an assassin delivery. And we've gotten to see that throughout this feud. Jungle Boy opening the show, I wasn't surprised about that given the card. I think, maybe outside of Jericho and Darby, I think he's probably opened more shows than any of them. It feels like the three of them typically are in that curtain jerk role, for different reasons, because the speed of what you're going to see and stuff. So, but yeah, when he did walk the ramp, though, the crowd was immediately hitting him with an Edge is better chant. So as soon as he started to come down to get involved, they're like, Edge is better, and they just started hammering on him. So yeah, he got what he wanted out of that crowd and knew what he was doing for sure.
I'll give I'll give them credit, because when I looked at that match, I'm like, Luchasaurus would definitely get more from the win, right? Like I was trying to debate who needs the win more. Jungle Boy has not won a lot lately, so I'm like, Jungle Boy really needs the win. But if they're gonna push Luchasaurus in any sort of way, he could really use it too, because it'll stop his momentum like dead in its tracks. And with Luchasaurus getting the win, I'm interested. Like are we gonna? Obviously, I would think that we're gonna get a return probably at Full Gear, but before we do we see Luchasaurus kind of slide up the card, maybe challenge Moxley or something like that, or Wardlow? Do you beat him before Jungle Boy beats him? Like what?
I don't know. We got a month to Full Gear, and I think that's part of the problem. The Christian injury dragged this feud probably longer than what they thought it was going to go.
He'll be out for another 6 months.
So what are we going to do? We're going to play around with Luchasaurus for a little while here. Now, that said, I would agree with you that Jungle Boy has certainly played the under on this, which I think makes sense from a size standpoint. But then again, in Arthur Ashe, he got to shake Rey Fenix's hand after the victory there too.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big win for him. So it's not like they're completely throttling him. It's just like, yes, in this feud, he has definitely felt like the underdog, but I think that's how you got to book this thing. You can't book him as the over, and he's come out a couple of different ways and stuff. I don't know. I think this is if anything, I think what this is setting us up for maybe is to get him away from Jungle Boy. And I think what I think is probably going to happen is we're going to see the character mature, and we're going to see him come out at some point towards the end of this as just Jack Perry, and it's probably going to be a different presentation if I had to guess, because he's going to have to go to another level, I think, and that's where they're pushing him as it is.
And what about Luchasaurus? He's
I don't know what to do.
At times he's super over. Sometimes the fans are
it was
really
50-50
into
last
him.
night. Last night it was 50-50 on the chance.
Yeah.
I don't know where you put Luchasaurus if he's not tied to Jungle Boy, but I guess that's for them to figure out. Like, he's a big giant monster. Who knows? Maybe he comes back, he shaves his head or whatever, takes the mask off, and he's something that's completely different. Good looking dude under there. So he's got a lot of versatility if he wants to get himself away from that at some point. But super athletic and stuff like that. But I don't know. He'll spin himself off into another feud or something like that, and we'll see what happens. There's plenty of big guys for him to wrestle too. So
there's not many loners in AEW. So Jungle Boy sitting out there by himself when he's got multiple people coming at him, it feels a little weird. So obviously I think, well, maybe they bring Marco back for, a squash or 3. But
there's a chance that they could bring him in the pay-per-view just for a spot or something like that, to slap some sense into Luchasaurus. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's we reconcile our differences and we go back and we run through the tag division again or something to that effect. We'll see.
Yeah. So we had that match. That was the first thing. And then we go straight back to Renee. So I said to myself, I'm like, oh, we're going to get an awful lot of Renee on this show. So she's backstage with Ethan Page, Stokely Hathaway, and Jose, whose last name is the assistant. The firm, I guess, pulled away Private Party, but now their Private Party is under contract with them. So that kind of set up our match for tonight, which will air on Friday. It's going to be Isaiah Cassidy versus Ethan Page. If Cassidy wins, they're free. If Ethan Page wins, the firm takes Matt Hardy's contract.
I don't know. Okay. This feels like what was the one where they had the one guy won the other guy's butler service or whatever? Like, okay, you've got a guy in your faction that's under contract to you, and like, what does that mean? Like, is he carrying everybody's gear bags or whatever? Like,
I think about Wardlow and MJF. That was well done in that way.
Sure.
But one thing I will say on this Dynamite, I noticed it more than other Dynamites. They did work hard to build up the Rampage matches.
Yeah.
So they did this angle, and then in the very next match, it was Warjo versus Nick Comoroto and QT Marshall. And by the time this segment was done, we actually had another Rampage match set up. So, what do you think of the Warjo team?
To me, it feels like Tony's not sure what to do with these guys right now.
Yeah.
Smash them together. They're formidable. It's hard to argue. Like, who can't these guys beat?
Right.
Literally anybody that you put them in the ring with. Like, they're giant animals.
Certainly, they can beat Nick Comoroto and QT Marshall, as they demonstrated.
Right. Or Little Nicky, as the back of his robe says now. It's a curious team. You've got two guys with belts that are singles belts smashed together in this tag team. Wardlow's not an ROH guy. It gives Samoa. It kind of I think what it does, if I had to guess, I think there's a degree of it. It sort of softens Joe's return. He doesn't have to be as physical in the matches, and he doesn't have to work a full match himself, so it fades him a little bit. It gives somebody as his tag team partner that he would respect enough to have as a tag team partner in there. And honestly, last night watching them, which I was paying attention to, they're having fun.
They have chemistry.
They do have some pretty good chemistry, and they're having fun and stuff like that. And to be honest with you, I think and I don't know what their relationship is like backstage, but having Wardlow paired up with Samoa Joe and Joe to give him some viciousness, I don't think hurts. He had some of that, but like, Wardlow still needs kind of like a tougher, like a more vicious edge to him. And I think I think that Samoa Joe can kind of help him with that as far as like his in-ring psychology and that kind of thing. So I mean, I do think that it's like, how do you book yourself out of this, or what do? You booked yourself into this sort of thing, but I don't know. It's interesting. They have good matches. You got two guys on the TV where normally you'd have to have two matches to get them on TV. You got your champions running around and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. Chances are they'll probably run into a Swerve Keith Lee style tag team, and that'll break off into their singles feuds, and they'll run the belts out maybe that way. It's interesting, but I don't know. That ring was full at the end of that segment for sure.
Yeah, because so they're getting ready. They pin, they submit Camarado, and then just for fun they give QT a powerbomb. And as they're warming up to give QT another powerbomb, Brian Cage, Gates of Agony, Prince Nana, together known as the Embassy, they come out. Nana has a few things to say, but really Cage gets after them and talks about how FTR is not even there. Well, FTR was there. So the FTR comes out, and that set up our match. FTR, they need a partner because they don't want Wardlow and Samoa Joe to have to work again because they work so hard, I guess. But they brought out another Canadian star who has new entrance music, by the way. They went away from the music that he's used ever since he turned on Cody. So Sean Spears is back.
Yeah, so we get Sean Spears, who comes out to the 10 chant, which I think, eventually this is going to have to boil to a him versus Preston Vance feud to decide who wins the 10.
Yeah.
The top of the 10s or something. I'm sure Jericho can come up with a nice moniker for whatever the match is. Sean, I've seen Sean a lot. I would say that that's the best physically he's looked in his career. Now, he's had a lot of time off. He's been gone longer than MJF. We saw him last before the MJF Wardlow match, and we hadn't seen him since. Now he's got a baby on the way, and there's different stuff that's going on, and a lot of things going on in his life. So he came out to a pretty sizable pop. It was very interesting to hear FTR announce that the pinnacle of wrestling is here.
Yes.
And I think they've been planting that pinnacle seed with FTR and Wardlow in the ring for a long time. So I think there's probably two ways that we go. Either MJF goes face, which we're seeing some seeds of that, and then he gets back and he's running Pinnacle and Pinnacle stays face, or he runs through Pinnacle saying, I formed this group. You're not the Pinnacle, I am. And it gives you this kind of subtle thing where he can go back on these guys that he left out to dry, but can spin and say, you guys got back together and you didn't even invite me back, and poor me, MJF, which we're seeing a little bit of that now. But in the end, in the ring, Wardlow was looking at Spears. Spears offered his hand out. Wardlow shook his hand and gave him a hug. I don't know if that was on camera for the show or not.
I don't think so.
But it happened. It did happen in the ring.
Okay.
So we have Spears as a face now, and we'll see what happens. Again, the knock on Sean Spears has never been his in-ring work. It's never been what he can do there. It's Sean, who is your character? Give me your character. They tried to give him the run with Tully. They tried to give him a bunch of other stuff. The psychopath with a chair, I actually didn't mind that of all the evolutions of Sean Spears that we've seen in the show. That kind of cold-hearted killer thing, the crazy person. But I don't know, maybe now that he's going to be a dad, he'd rather be on the good side of the stick and is kind of going from there. And you know what? If I'm Sean Spears, what am I going to say? Don't put me in a faction with FTR and Wardlow right now, please.
Well, the other thing is, when they look at how over the scissor thing got, the 10 thing can get back over like really crazy too.
Oh, 100%.
So
100%.
So there's that. And, you brought up the MJF aspect of the Pinnacle, and then you kind of look over at Samoa Joe too, and you're like, well, maybe that's another angle. But it's a weird one because Joe's got that ROH TV title, and MJF is not going to be interested in that at all. So
no, I think it's very interesting, and I think it's interesting because I don't know how long this potential storyline's been in play, because I remember going back and Max was very adamant that this faction was 5 guys and he wanted 5. And I think there was always always a plan that he was going to split away from the faction and do something else or whatever, so that there was 4 left over, which is 2 singles guys and a tag team to face. So it'll be interesting. I like that FDR's carrying on the Pinnacle thing. We'll know that it's full story when you see the first shirt come out. And it's the 4 of them on the Pinnacle shirt, which I thought they were going to show last night. Pro Wrestling teased Pinnacle back or something like that, and it hasn't been there yet. So,
well, and then you know when Pinnacle was with MJF, they also had Tully,
right?
So, you know, maybe that's the Samoa Joe spot. You know,
sure. Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Just moving through the show, Tony Schiavone's with Jericho in 2.0. The 2.0 says that Danielson made it personal, and Jericho says, "All honor the Ocho."
So you watch that interview back, and as soon as Tony goes to Matt Menard, you got to look at Jericho's face, because he's trying to keep it together, and he's smiling, but his smile's sort of breaking, which is why when they bring the mic over to him during that segment, he went low voice on it, because he was going to crack up when Menard. There was an infinite Daddy Magic chance in the crowd all night long. Right? So
also Canadian guys.
Yeah, exactly. So 2 Canadian guys with the King of Canada in there with him too. So like when they came out, yes, it was obviously a massive pop. But watching Jericho try to hold it back when Menard took the mic, it was
those guys perfect. Are so undervalued. When they even when they were pretty over in WWE as maybe upper level jobbers when they left as Everrise, and the fact that they landed in AEW, I think, surprised a lot of people. But their stuff has been gold.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of them, they were doing their thing in NXT when I was sort of tuning out of NXT.
And most of the stuff that was getting them over, they were actually not doing on TV.
Right, exactly. Which their show and stuff, which I've since gone back and watched, a whole lot of talent there, a lot of opportunity and stuff. Their Hey AEW thing was pretty funny too, that I watched with RJ City. So yeah, I think there's a lot of talent there. I think their in-ring work is great. It's just one of those things where you've got another talented group of guys on a roster with, it goes back to the sign that I had a million years ago. That's too much talent, not enough TV. You gotta land some other hours of TV in order to get all these people in there, because it's just squandered.
Yeah, and I hope they do soon, because that Ring of Honor brand really needs a little something.
Yeah, I mean, I think I will say this: it feels like they must be getting closer to that, because ROH is a medium to a big size part of the show now. So they've established who their characters are. I think that you bring in an hour show. Your undercard is where you're going to start reestablishing some other people too, and we'll see what they bring back for ROH and stuff like that. But it's on TV, it's prevalent. The brand is there, and I think that's Tony smartly positioning it where, like, hey, there's equity here. By the way,
sure.
Putting the belt on Jericho says a lot about how they feel about that brand in general and what they want it to be.
Yeah. The next match was Swerve and Daddy Ass, and Swerve cheated to get the win. No big surprise there. I get the impression that Keith Lee is purposefully being distanced from this thing.
Oh, 100%. I think it is their intention to have Keith Lee be the good guy and Swerve be the bad guy, and maybe we'll actually see the Swerve Keith Lee thing. Swerve is a better villain for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
His in-ring work is amazing. I had a Swerve section sign at the show, of course, going up against a lot of scissors. There were more scissors than Swerve section. I think he's phenomenal. I think he's good in like a lot of different aspects, on top of being a really, really talented guy. The finish was a little weird looking, grabbing the ropes and stuff like that. The ref was positioned in the right way where he can make that work, but it was a very quick 3 count, and then boom, out the door he goes. I don't think we're going to see Keith Lee in here unless we see Keith come back and stop a cheat or something like that. And I think we're going to ultimately end up seeing that, which is great, because at the time when everybody thought they were going to see this Swerve Lee implosion, I don't think they had established Swerve and Keith enough in their face heel roles. So the match would have been a split thing now versus, okay, let's go into it. It's clearly that this guy's the bad guy, this guy's the good guy, and let's make this work.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, and both of them, if they're going to ascend, they need some big singles victories. And
Absolutely.
Getting one over the other would be a good start.
Mm-hmm.
So MJF is backstage with Alex Marvez, and I thought this was a excellent MJF promo. He's such a natural heel, and Jericho said at the All Out presser that when he came back, he was gonna have to be a face, and absolutely. I mean, he came back to a hero's welcome when he came back, but he immediately shit on the fans, and now he's taken a slow approach there, and his promo was excellent. He put Stokely Hathaway in his place. He then said he's got something on Regal that Regal doesn't want him to expose. And then he talked about he wasn't sure if he's going to shake Yuta's hand last week. And then, if you don't like me, too bad. I don't like me either. I punch the guy in the mirror all the time. Great road to babyface promo.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? He still wants you to he's trying to justify his nefarious actions by saying that when he looked at the road to get to greatness, it was paved by mean insensitivity, not kindness and caring, is basically what the promo said.
He had to be a bad guy.
It's an interesting way to do it. I think what you do is you have a character now that you have that's allowed to be the gray Jedi in the middle of this, right? He can come in. He's already giving himself permission to do things that are underhanded, but also saying that the reason that he's doing it and his motivation for doing it is he has to do it that way. He can't do it the clean way. Something to chew on. In a good way.
And then at some point down the road, if he is going to go babyface, it's just, fully, it's just a realization that, I can do this the right way. I can win the right way. And what the impetus for that would be, I don't know. But he was there. He was there backstage, did that interview. Next thing we had was Tony Schiavone in the ring with Jon Moxley and later Hangman Page. And he was there for that, actually eating popcorn, which was hysterical, by the way. But Jon Moxley comes out and he says he's happy to be back in Canada after 3 years. He being world champion is a dirty business. It's a lot of pressure. Some crack a lot sooner under that pressure than others. And then Hangman Page comes to the ring. And, Hangman Page is one of those guys that, interesting. We were talking about somebody else earlier who the in-ring work was never the problem. Hangman Page, I don't think is always that great on the mic, but sometimes he gets on a roll, and like he did last night, he got himself on a roll, and he did the Ric Flair thing where he's hitting himself in the face, and he drew blood, and then he put that blood on Moxley's shirt. He's glad Moxley has Moxley's respect because all his friends are either disappearing or have disappeared. Really good promo to set up their match next week in Cincinnati, and I gotta believe Moxley walks away as champion next week, but great promo from Hangman Page.
Yeah, and he does have a couple of those bangers in him. And it's interesting, right? He's talked about it openly, so it's not like I'm telling tales out of school. Socially he struggles a little bit.
Sure.
Crowds are not his favorite thing. This harkens back to the other time when I was like, man, that's a really nice promo, and it was the one that CM Punk had all the issues over, because I thought that was his other memorable promo, and I thought it was memorable before all the heat came up about it. But I think it feels to me like Adam has done either some acting lessons or something to that effect. He still comes out with a scripted promo that he's worked on, and I think there's the more that he changes it to his own words and the more he believes it, the better that promo ends up being. But when MJF came out in the middle of that, the spotlight got put up there, which shifted the entire crowd, and I was on that side, and the whole entire crowd was looking up there. and it cracked him in the middle of the promo. But I'll give him credit to say he jumped in and said, you can sit up there and watch all you want, and then he went right back into it. So he's still on a robotic sort of tail to get to where he is, but he does, I think now, before somebody was handing him the script, and I think now he's writing it more himself. So I think it's more in his words, and he can deliver it with a little bit more emotion, and it's very, very good. I hate to say a promo is wasted, but I don't see him beating John Moxley in Cincinnati. And I don't know where he goes from there. And, that's kind of the story of Adam Page, really.
Yeah, exactly. They have a pretty decent story. You and I were there, I want to say Philly, when they referenced the ladder match. It's when Hangman Page returned. He was gone for a long time. He won the casino ladder match. They referenced that. You and I were there for that. Yeah, Page is one of those guys, like, what program does he hop in next? It's nice that he's getting this, what is really his return match, because he didn't really have a return for the title. So I'll be happy to see it. I think it'll be a good victory for Moxley.
Well, so one of the places where I feel like it can go, and this is some inside baseball for those people that don't tune into other product. Moxley lost the GCW title to Nick Gage over the weekend in a very Moxley Nick Gage-esque match. Pretty good show from GCW. If you haven't watched the replay, go and check it out. But it was Stokely Hathaway and Morrissey that attacked Moxley during the match that caused him to lose the match. So I could very much see this going into some sort of a finish whereby the firm comes down and attacks both men. We get a respectful sort of handshake and a loose thing there. And you've got the firm with BCC, but you could also have the firm with issues with Adam Page. There's a whole lot of people that are there that they can work with. So maybe that's the direction that it goes. And that spins off to, Adam with the Dark Order again, which is weird and cute at the same time.
Also, I don't believe there has been any change to the status of the Bucks and Omega. The fact that they were just slightly referenced with the whole disappearing thing had to be somewhat intentional. So maybe there's something there for Hangman as well. I don't, like I said, I have no idea when they're gonna return, if they're gonna return. But when they do, there's a natural storyline that needs to be finished there.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, it's not the same, but Brandon Cutler wrestled on Dark a day ago or whatever. So Brandon's back. I'm sure Michael Nakazawa is going to be back and that kind of thing as well. So I don't know. It's interesting to see. I think there's litigation that's going on to some level at this point because everybody's been so quiet about everything. So who knows what that fallout's going to end up being, but I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine Punk back in an AEW ring, let alone a wrestling ring, unless he needs to make a mortgage payment or something at this point based on how that thing unfolded, because love him or hate him, the way he handled himself and conducted himself during that interview isn't anything that anybody in professional realms probably going to want to take on, controversy or not.
Yeah, and then he swung first.
Right.
And there's no conflicting reports about that.
Not at all, so.
So I mean,
that said, that entire controversy has given us a great AEW run. The company, despite some of the nonsense that we've seen with the Sammy drama and the different stuff with Andrade and who knows what's going to happen there. And as much as I like Andrade and as much as, and I was trying to, maybe this is me just trying to reconcile it in my head or stuff. I mean, I think we were there when he came out and stuff and we got to see him and his run has sort of been forgetful in the middle of this thing. He hasn't really established himself that much. I know the translation stuff ends up being a little bit hard. It feels like a lot of people are going to kind of run back to significant others at this point. So I could certainly see him going back to WWE, and maybe he thinks there's a better fit there and he'll get something else. But I certainly remember his run in WWE as well. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't memorable. I mean, him and what's-his-face feuded for a million years during the pandemic. Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah. Chris Jericho, Bryan Danielson match was up next. Ring of Honor World Title. Bobby Cruise doing introductions. Ian Riccaboni on commentary, which, again, they're keeping those ties tight. So I hope there's a Ring of Honor announcement soon, even if it's just streaming. We need something here. This match goes, I don't know how long it went, but the finish was Jericho about to hit Danielson with the title belt, and Danny Garcia comes down, rips the title belt out of Jericho's hands, and does the work for Jericho. So,
Yeah.
and so, I felt like this match was happening kind of oddly. Not that we haven't seen Jericho Danielson before, because this was the third match. It just was kind of weird that we would have Danielson challenging for the Ring of Honor title, which should be a real big deal, and it was just kind of announced. But then there's the Garcia factor.
So where he decided to put this match kind of really tipped his hand, I think, as far as what was going to go on
for the rest of the show.
Garcia coming out and blasting him is interesting, but like I think we've seen this double triple swerve thing before, and I guess when it happens more than once, it's less cool each time it happens.
It was predictable,
right?
Super.
What's gonna go on here? We'll see. I guess we're gonna have JAS against Blackpool Combat Club, but I mean, we started off with that feud with Blood and Guts, which at the time I said this is probably the wrong thing to do. I think, it's almost like we backwards builded into this thing where, what are you going to do? Another Blood and Guts? Please don't. Like,
well, we also did Anarchy in the Arena too.
Right.
So
maybe we'll have something else that's crazy, and this time Mike Santana doesn't have to get hurt or whatever.
Yeah.
Or broken nose or whatever. It was strange. I'm like, okay, well, they're not going to main the women's match. Then they're gonna be maining the Cassidy Pac match, and like if they're putting that on at the end, obviously, the result's gonna be the result. So,
right. But before we even got to the women's match, there was a backstage segment again, Renee Paquette with Nyla Rose, Marina Shafir, and Vicky Guerrero, and Nyla Rose has possession of Jade Cargill's TBS title, and Anna Jay challenges Nyla for Jade's title, and Nyla says she'll kick JAS's ASS. And Nyla Rose is hysterical. She's so funny. She has always been a great Twitter follow. I'm so happy that they're like playing off that a little bit on TV now, because her promo was very, very funny.
Yeah, that little three group team is pretty funny too. Marina Shafir, who's pretty straight, but although if you caught her promo a couple of weeks ago, the promo that she did when I was in Buffalo was pretty good. In the weird hat that she was in, or the hat that everybody referenced. So Marina's got some stuff to say too. But yeah, Nyla's really funny. I don't know. There's a hilarious part of me. I can't remember a time in wrestling, and maybe it's because my memory is so bad, but we're gonna have a TBS title defense that somebody stole against another wrestler on the show. I mean, we've seen belts get taken and stuff like that, but it's like, this is going to be a defense. I don't, that's just cool and different in the first place. And like, I don't know, good on you, Anna, for deciding you're going to step up to the Nyla plate, our former women's champion, to have a match there, and good on them to get an angle. Like, I don't know. At least Nyla is somebody that I can look at that Jade would wrestle against, where I'm like, oh yeah, you know what? Nyla could actually take the title from Jade if and that would be something where I would be like, oh, this is not a surprise to me. This is something that could actually happen. And now you've got your first 2 times women's champion with different belts. And Nyla's great. So
Yep. Yeah. The women's tag match came up next. It was Jamie Hayter, who's super over, with Britt Baker. I'm glad Jamie's coming out with her own music now, and she's coming out first, versus Hikaru Shida and Toni Storm. At the end of the match, Baker and Shida are just trading a bunch of roll-ups, countering back and forth, and then Shida got Baker down for the W. Well,
you know what that's the throwback to, right? So you had roll-up, double roll-up, and then they won on the triple roll-up. That's Owen Brett finish. Except it was the roll-up one, it was the roll-up the other that got the pin. Well, this went 3 roll-ups and got the pin. So I think it was an homage to that match on the different roll-ups, to kind of do that finish. I'm like, oh, they're doing Brett and Owen. And then they went the third one, and I was like, oh, okay, you put your own spin on this thing. I was okay with the finish because of that. Yeah, you're right though. The Jamie Hayter, the name of that track is called Indignation, and
Yeah.
when that first beat used to hit, everybody kind of looked up and they're like, oh, who's coming out now? When that thing hits, it
Yeah.
hits and it pops, and they let her come out to that. I mean, I had a Hater Hits Harder sign that she acknowledged when Tony Storm was coming out. So and it's funny because it's very clear to me that Tony Schiavone read my sign too, because Tony Schiavone's first line when Hater came out was one of the hardest hitting women in the women's division. I'm like, Tony, you're welcome for that line. And then he referenced it again in the middle of the match. So I'm like, it's good that he's paying attention to the crowd as well. But yeah, it was a fine, fun tag match that we got to see there.
It was
Sheeta
fine.
is
Sheeta getting the win sets up a title match for next week. And a point I wanted to make, when I think about the AEW's women's division, I think the match quality was highest around the title when Sheeta was champion. I think it's been somewhat tough since then. Now, Britt Baker, she obviously elevated the title with character work and stuff like that. So she was, I think, the biggest star, at least they had in that position. But I'm excited for a Sheeta Tony Storm match. Hopefully, hopefully they have a great match.
Yeah, I suspect they will. I would agree with you. I think that the quality of wrestling during the pandemic era had to be very good as
Sure.
well. I think you had to be on your game. And that's not to say that we've seen a lot of injuries, we've seen a lot of new characters, a bunch of people have come back. There's a whole bunch of things going on. But as far as the quality of the wrestling, sometimes it definitely gets lost in the sauce there. And I don't know. I'm not sure who's doing the production on those matches and who's putting those together. Some of them are definitely harder than others. I don't know what we're going to get out of this thing, and it's weird to me that we're seeing Thunder Rosa gone for this long.
Yeah,
I think the dragging of this women's interim belt thing sucks.
Yeah, if it's like a
this,
month, I get it, but like it's or whatever. But this is long.
It's almost felt like I don't even know if they're referencing her on broadcast anymore or anything like that. So I don't know what's going on with her in general.
They keep calling it the interim.
They need to move on from it or figure out what they need to do to make that thing happen. And there really has not been any kind of announcement of what the injury is that she suffered.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony Storm, even in commentary, said, I guess she's injured,
right,
as the answer for it. So like, I don't know. Are they going to bring Thunder back and she's going to be a villain or whatever? I'm fine with that. That's okay. But let's do something here. Let's
maybe she comes back. I don't know how the dates line up, but Day of the Dead's pretty soon.
Sure.
November 1st, 2nd.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we see her at Full Gear.
Maybe. Yep. So, main event, Pac versus Orange Cassidy, All Atlantic Championship. Kind of, like you said, they kind of telegraphed it for us. And all of the booking up to this point just made the finish to this match make a whole lot of sense. Pac would go for the hammer. Danhausen stops him. Oh, he's got another one. Bryce stops him. Orange stops him, hits a bunch of orange punches, gets the W. Orange Cassidy is your All-Atlantic champion. Orange confetti, the whole 9 yards. I busted out an Orange Cassidy shirt, which I didn't even know I had. So there you go. Orange Cassidy, new All-Atlantic championship.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a blessing and a curse sometimes to be part of the live audience in that. That's a perfect Orange Cassidy shirt. So when the tag match happened at Arthur Ashe, and I was on the floor at the time, they rolled the confetti machine out next to me. Last night, we saw the confetti machines coming in. Not that I needed to see them coming in, given where it was positioned on the card, but yeah, it's kind of part of that.
It's a cool visual, though.
Not that it made for a bad match. It's very awesome. It looks great on TV and things like that. They had another good match. The two of them have good in-ring chemistry. I'd love to see Pac mocking him with the kicks, the backing up. I thought that was very, very, very well done.
I mean, what do you
Yeah.
think of Pac, of Orange Cassidy as champion, though? Because I was really excited about Pac being champion because I thought, okay, he'll go home to the UK and he'll wrestle and defend it a bunch there. And he did a little bit, and they showed those matches on Dark, but not as much as I thought that he was going to do as part of that champion. And I just don't see Orange Cassidy doing that type of thing. So it makes me think, well, what does this championship really mean then?
It feels like another belt. I agree. I don't see him doing a Japan tour or a,
I thought it'd be cool if he did like the Caribbean or something like that, like go down to Puerto Rico.
Maybe he'll be at Triple Mania and we'll see a defense there or something. Yeah, I don't know. Orange Cassidy as a champion is an interesting thing for me because he's not a guy that talks very much or does anything in terms of promos and stuff. Not that Pac does a ton of them, but we saw some back and forth there. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what this looks like now.
Yeah. Well, like we said, it was when they announced the All Atlantic Championship. It was kind of a head scratcher, but then Pac won it, and it was okay. This kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
and I think it's back to it being a head scratcher a little bit, but we'll see where they go with it.
Right.
Rampage on Friday. Nyla Rose versus Anna JAS for Jade's TBS title. FTR and Sean Spears versus The Embassy, which is Brian Cage and the Gates of Agony. Ethan Page and Isaiah Cassidy with Private Party and Matt Hardy's contracts on the line. John Moxley and Claudio versus the Butcher and the Blade, which Butcher and Blade are not too far from home either.
No, and they've worked up in Preston has worked up in that area a lot and stuff. So they were well known. They were actually the last dark match before they ended up going live and stuff, and the crowd was really on them. I think it's a good card. It's got a lot of Canadian / upstate New York flavor kind of sprinkled all over it. So I'm sure the crowd will be there. They must have a game going on Friday, which is the reason why they didn't do it on Friday, or else they need to get out of Dodge or whatever the case may be. It's a weird doing a Wednesday live show and then a Thursday live show. And I'm not sure why they're doing it that way or what the reasoning is for it. Maybe their indication on the ticket sales initially was, it was always set up as a 2-day thing. So it wasn't like,
easier. I mean, they're doing a lot of experimentation with Rampage. There's not a lot of taped, well, I shouldn't say taped. There's not a lot of traditional Dynamite Rampage events throughout the rest of the year. They have a one-off in Jacksonville. They have the one-off for the night before Full Gear.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that stuff that's happening. So it could be that they're doing some experimenting. By doing it on Thursday, I suppose they can go earlier. Whereas if they do it live, or if they just do it on Friday at all, they really aren't going to go early and then delay it like an hour.
Yeah, that's a good point. You do get to do it in a better time slot, which, funny enough, like the Rampage in Vegas was perfect because you were going live on Rampage on Friday at 7:00 in Vegas, which everybody was out of work, and the crowd was in a pretty good way. And I'll be at the New Jersey one too, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes and how they kind of frame that show. But yeah, that's a good point. You do get to go at whatever time you decide that you want to do it, and then it's live, for another day.
And I think the experimentation is both on ticket sales and on ratings.
Yeah, I still think that the way that they're probably going to end up having to do this thing is like, if they were going to go Wednesday, Thursday, which Thursday is the old Thunder spot, and actually the old SmackDown spot too. I think the way to do it is still do an hour ROH and an hour Rampage on that Thursday, and maybe one show is the live show and the other show is the tape show, and then you've only got a 1-day delay in between the tape.
Yeah,
you've got the crew there, and it's the same. I think it's difficult sometimes to try to go back to the same market 2 days in a row that are in the middle of the week and say pull ticket sales out of there.
It's so funny because as John Takani and I have been doing shows recapping and reacting to the Tales from the Territory episodes that have been going on, and they've been focused on Memphis the last few years, or for the last 2 weeks, and they're talking about filling the Mid-South Coliseum, which is 10,000 seat building. They just ran it every Monday night, and they filled it. Those territory days were just bonkers because they could run the same market every week and fill that building. Wrestling is not the same as it used to be.
Well, and I think what you're looking at is the difference between entertainment as well, right? Entertainment is so wide, and we're so self-selecting when it comes to that kind of stuff. And it's interesting because I was reading somebody's commentary the other day about the way the landscape shaped and the way it's turned a little bit, and like, wow, the wrestling audience is a lot more of a mature audience overall than what we would have thought. There was a lot more kids involved. Well, because kids have access to 24/7 entertainment.
Yeah.
They'll watch a YouTuber, they'll watch something on their iPads or whatever, rather than sitting down with dad or mom or both and watching wrestling together. Like, that happens to some degree now, but kids are in the room playing Fortnite or whatever, or Minecraft or whatever they end up wanting to do, and it's not like this is what the family is watching now, let's all watch this thing together. Everybody's got their own screen. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this next generation of wrestling fan and where they come from, and what makes them there. And I think like, we see the seedings of that with, like, he's older, but like WWE deciding to grab Logan Paul is them trying to capture a younger audience and younger eyeballs in. And I think to a degree, you're going to have to do more and more and more of that. AEW's smartly done that with some of the hip hop people that they've decided to grab to try to get younger eyeballs in and stuff. But like, how you get them away from their own shows and different things like that, like Danhausen obviously was a big move that way. But where that younger generation of fan is going to come from, if it isn't, mom or dad dragging it into the show and telling you why it matters or why it's relevant, we got to sit down every week. They don't have to anymore.
Yeah. Dynamite next week is Tuesday. It's on a Tuesday. It's going to be interesting. We reignite the NXT Dynamite war. It's obviously not going to be good for either show. And Dynamite's loaded up pretty good. NXT is also loaded up pretty good. Talking about Dynamite, since we're here, it's Moxley versus Hangman Page, which we talked about. Tony Storm versus Shida. In my mind, feel free to agree or disagree, but in my mind, this is just a win for Tony Storm. I'd loved Shida's run, like I said, but I just don't see Tony Storm dropping that title. It would make almost no sense with the interim label on it still. So,
yeah, when we didn't really see that happen on the men's side of things either. I don't know. It's hard to say what they're building towards at Full Gear at this point specifically, because if you would have asked me when I was leaving All Out in Chicago that we were going to go to Tony Storm versus Jamie Hayter there, or we were going to see Tony Storm and Thunder Rosa there, and maybe that's still the answer. Maybe we're still going to get Tony Thunder. But yeah, I don't see Shida grabbing this for a 3-minute run in the middle of it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Shida deserves a title, or deserves a title after she carried the title the entire pandemic, which sucked. The first live crowd she was in front of, she had to drop it at the pay-per-view to Britt. So, like, that's sour grapes for her, poor girl.
I think a Shida Thunder Rosa match would be great, though.
Oh, absolutely. I think
that'd be a good scenario for both of them, because Thunder, I think we all realize Thunder is a great wrestler, but often we just don't often get great matches. So maybe that'd be an opportunity to get a really good match if Shida does get the win, and then they have to merge it later. So that's an option.
Yeah.
The other thing I was wondering about around this women's division is Jamie Hayter obviously is going to get a title shot, but she's also obviously going to fight Britt Baker at some point. And to me, I'm always wondering what happens first. Does she go for the title and then there's issues with Baker there? Does she win the title and have issues with Baker? Does she lose the title and then have issues? Or does she split with Baker and do a big long feud there and then go for the title after she maybe wins against Britt Baker?
Yeah, there's a lot of options there. I mean, you could have Britt winning the title and then her winning the title against Britt. It could be a 3-way match or whatever, and Britt pulls the same thing over and over again. I don't know. It was odd to me that they rectified
Yeah, me
Uh,
too. I thought that,
I didn't think they were going to reconcile. I thought this was Jamie going her own way, but I think some of that probably had to do with like where they want to be right now with the interim situation.
and think about
Um,
how long the Christian Cage Jungle Boy thing was.
yeah,
You
they
know,
go for a while on these things, and it's weird though. With as long as the feuds are, most of the time when we come across the other side of it, I still don't feel like it was repetitive and or oh, I've seen this again.
Mhm.
So they find interesting ways to sort of string it along without it being 47 different combinations of the same match, with the penultimate one being eh.
Yeah. We'll be hearing from MJF, and then Renee Young will be interviewing Wheeler Yuta and Bryan Danielson. Renee Young, listen to me. Renee Paquette.
There you go.
WWE wanted Renee Young to come back, and that's actually how the story that was leaked a little bit earlier this week is because WWE had approached Renee, and when that didn't happen, they told some of the journalists out there that they believed Renee was going to be going to AEW because they couldn't secure her. So it kind of had leaked a bit, and then they announced it before the Toronto show.
I mean, that's a WWE dirty pool when it comes to that kind of stuff. Sometimes, like they
But you know
can
what's
certainly utilize a media outlet.
I would not have taken a no from Renee as she's locked in with AEW, because she has a thing that she does with, I think, the Bengals.
Mm-hmm.
So she has a lot of like projects that she's working on. So to me, it's like, if she said no, maybe she just didn't need you. You know?
Well, she worked there for a long period of time.
Yeah.
She knows who's there, and
her husband just signed 5-year deal with AEW.
Well, and along with that too, to circle back to Max being on again, there's no way, given how he's handled his socials lately, given the interviews that he's given and how he's handling the company, that I don't think part of him getting more money came with an extension. This 2024 contract war thing, I think we'll hear that quieting down a little bit, especially if he goes on a face run for a little bit. I mean, you could obviously fire that up again, but
or
the company man that he's
become, as much as you want, as long as you say AEW won.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the other side of it too, right? Like he can build it, get them all scintillating, and boy, what a shot in the gut it's going to be when you say Tony decided he was the better option. Like that's a savaging to them. So yeah, that's the way they could definitely handle that. But there's no part of me that says that, because the difference in his attitude and his tenor towards company things now isn't just I got a bump in paycheck. It's more of a brand carry look to it.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to watch. But the different pieces that they decided to put together, making it more cohesive and more polished and more professional, is a good thing. Who knows? I mean, I don't know what Paul White's status is and Mark Henry's status is. Maybe it's time for the main event on Rampage, and takes that spot or something to that degree too. So we'll see.
All right. Anything else? I think we've gone through Dynamite pretty well.
Yeah, Dynamite's covered. We got Rampage that's coming up. It'll be an interesting one to watch. I don't have anything specifically on for the weekend that I'm really setting my sights on. Hopefully the Yankees get another victory today. That'll set a nice tone towards that series.
There's a
Overall,
whole bunch of
a lot of good wrestling.
I mean, New Japan shows coming up. Maybe even this weekend. I can't quite remember, but
FTR Aussie Open. I know that match is going to be up on New Japan World today or tomorrow or something. And
did you see? I haven't watched a live broadcast of New Japan in a while, but did you see they're doing a TV title?
Oh yes, the tournament.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. The idea is they're encouraging high speed, which is what something that Stardom does, has a high speed championship, and they said they're going to be focusing on the young guys, and the tournament brackets they have Ren Narita's in there. Aside from that, they're not like the young guys.
Well, so what was interesting when I looked at that bracket, in something like that, sometimes I think there'd be like sometimes there's like a Naito in there, or there's a
Yeah.
Shingo, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's gonna come down to these two guys or whatever. It's not blatantly obvious to me who's gonna end up having this title at the end. And maybe that says more about how they feel about the title than anything else as well, because the star power that's packed into that tournament doesn't feel as big as some of the other tournaments that they do. I mean, it's all names that are notable and all names that we know and names that we see, but it's not, you don't have an Okada in there, you don't have any of those bigger name guys, so it'll be interesting. It's like, I don't know, it when I looked at it, I'm like, this just feels like what a never open bracket would look like to me. Like,
yeah, I mean, maybe the idea is, well, first, all the TV title matches are gonna air for free on New Japan World.
Yep.
So in that way, it's like, here, come sample our product. If you like what you saw, maybe you want to watch a whole show. So you think, okay, well, if that's the case, maybe you want to have one of your, a star in there, or maybe the idea is to make a star from there. So
yeah,
I think you got a couple different routes, but
yeah, we'll see.
Yep. All right, I think we've covered the topic du jour. So this has been Conversing Cousins, blood splatter and all.